Part 60. God Level Tip, report the walking 500,000 at the beginning. Author, Tien Taido. Chapter 594. Just when Li Hao was still wondering about the divine talent and supreme Dao bone rewarded by the system. Boom. Invisibly, it seemed that a supreme power surged into Li Hao's body. In just a moment, Li Hao's cultivation began to soar at this moment. Directly stepped from the realm of earthly immortals into the realm of heavenly immortals. Lower grade heavenly immortals. At the same time, Li Hao could clearly feel that his body seemed to have undergone a transformation, or sublimation, at this moment. Li Hao's body became ethereal and incomparable. At this moment, all the attributes of the talent seemed to be close to him again. The great Dao is natural. It seems that he can do whatever he wants, and all the power between heaven and earth can be controlled by himself. This seems to be the ability given to Li Hao by the divine full attribute talent. Not only that, Li Hao's body has an extra Dao bone. The bone of the great Dao. The Dao bone is filled with supreme divine power, as if it is above everything. Li Hao is not clear about the power given by this Dao bone for the time being, but Li Hao has a feeling that if he reveals this Dao bone, it will cause a great shock. He must not use this Dao bone easily. At the moment when this Dao bone entered Li Hao's body. Dong. Dong dong dong. A crisp bell sound seemed to come from the 9 heavens, shaking the earth and resounding in this space. What is this sound? It sounds a bit like a bell. Where does the bell sound come from? We don't have bells in the Tianxing sect. What a terrible bell sound, I feel my soul is trembling. What is this bell sound? When this bell sounded above the Tianxing sect, countless people in the Tianxing sect were shocked by it, and even many figures came out of the secluded place, confused and didn't know what happened. Everyone heard the bell sound, and after searching for a while, they didn't know where the bell sound came from. But at this moment, on some of the peaks of the Tianxing sect, there were towering figures who noticed something and then showed surprise on their faces. The sound of the great Dao bell. This is the sound of the great Dao bell. Who caused the sound of the great Dao bell? Is it the evildoer of our Tianxing sect? Just when the high-level leaders of the Tianxing sect were shocked, some disciples of the Tianxing sect exclaimed again. Everyone, look at the sky. What is that? I saw that a huge phantom appeared above the sky of the Tianxing sect, but the phantom could not be seen clearly, as if it was above all living beings, giving people a feeling that this figure was the incarnation of the great Dao. Buzz buzz buzz. Between heaven and earth, there were endless Buddhist sounds, 9 rainbows illuminated the entire sky, and the sky was full of rosy clouds. It also transformed into auspicious beasts, roaring and cheering in the void. Strange phenomenon. This is a strange phenomenon. Oh my God, is there any divine object descending? How can there be a strange phenomenon? Is it caused by one of our ancestors? Immediately, exclamations came out from countless disciples of the Tianxing sect. It is rumored that when a divine object that defies the heavens descends, or when the cultivation of some amazing and brilliant evildoers breaks the rules of heaven and earth, it will cause strange phenomena in heaven and earth. The situation in front of us is just as the rumor said. At this moment, the entire Tianxing sect looked up at the sky in shock. Some bigwigs of the Tianxing sect also used their spiritual consciousness to explore, trying to find a clue, but in the end they found nothing. What caused this strange phenomenon in the sky? Who caused it? Everyone was confused in their hearts, but they could not get an answer. This strange phenomenon lasted for 2 or 3 minutes before it dissipated, but everyone's hearts could not calm down for a long time. Li Hao also looked up at the sky, and his heart was filled with turmoil and he could not calm down. Li Hao was shocked to find that he was standing right below this strange phenomenon. This strange phenomenon was definitely caused by the supreme Dao bone in his body. This supreme Dao bone was definitely a heaven-defying thing. Fortunately, the range covered by this strange phenomenon was quite large, and it did not reveal his supreme Dao bone. If he revealed this supreme Dao bone, who knows what would happen to be even more shocking. At this moment, Li Hao had a more firm belief that he would never reveal this supreme Dao bone unless it was absolutely necessary. Li Hao calmed down his heart, and a faint smile appeared on the corner of his mouth again. His cultivation was even stronger, but next, he had to keep a low profile. Next, Li Hao continued to fly on his sword in the Tianxing sect, wandering around, not knowing what to do, let alone where to go. At a certain moment, Li Hao saw a towering cliff not far away. The cliff stood there like a long sword, breaking through the sky. What a powerful sword intent! Even though it was a long distance away, Li Hao actually felt a very powerful sword intent. The sword intent was so shocking that it seemed to break the entire sky. What is this place? The next moment, Li Hao moved directly and headed forward. Soon, Li Hao arrived in front of the cliff. Sword wall. Li Hao saw two bright red characters sword wall written on a stone standing next to him. Is this cliff in front of him the sword wall? Li Hao also saw that at this moment, in front of this sword wall, there were figures sitting cross-legged. And these figures also have some common characteristics, that is, the temperament of these figures is very sharp. Moreover, some of these figures carry long swords on their backs, some hold long swords in their hands, and some even sit cross-legged with long swords on their bodies. They are also filled with very powerful sword intent, and these sword intents are the sword intents that these figures have comprehended by themselves. Obviously, these figures are all sword cultivators. Even if some are not sword cultivators, they may be advancing on the path of sword cultivation and preparing to become sword cultivators. These sword cultivators were obviously disciples of the Tianxing sect. At this moment, what they were doing was naturally practicing. Li Hao also noticed that there was a cracked pattern on the sword wall. The pattern came from the top, as if it was cut by a sword. An extremely terrifying sword intent emanated from this pattern. This sword, if nothing unexpected happened, should have been left by a great sword master. The terrifying sword intent filled in it was also cultivated by this master. The disciples of the Tianxing sect in front of them were comprehending the supreme sword intent on the sword wall, thereby improving their sword power. And these figures were all separated from the sword wall by a distance of 100 feet. There were also people within 100 feet, but they were rare. Li Hao noticed that the guys in the front were all strong in cultivation, at least they were all in the realm of middle-grade celestial beings, but Li Hao didn't know any of them and didn't care too much. The next moment, Li Hao also went straight to the sword wall in front. This is clearly a good place to practice swordsmanship. It is a good place. Li Hao can be regarded as a sword cultivator and has cultivated his own sword intent. At this moment, he can use the sword wall in front of him to temper his sword intent. At this moment, Li Hao is still at the edge of the sword wall, outside the range of more than 200 feet, and the feeling is not very obvious. But then, Li Hao's figure moved directly and went forward, and the speed was very fast. In the blink of an eye, he came to within 200 feet, then 190 feet, 180 feet, and 170 feet. He didn't stop yet. Where did this green head come from? Such a fast speed, want to directly enter the 100 feet? Is he stupid or brain dead? I haven't seen it before. It should be another disciple who has just entered the sect. Really looking for death. This scene fell into the eyes of the surrounding Tianxing sect disciples, and someone immediately made a sound of surprise. In the eyes of these people, the guy in front of them rushed in rashly, which was simply asking for trouble. They all knew that under the sword wall, the closer to the sword wall, the stronger the sword will be. Especially within 100 feet, it is not something that ordinary people can bear. If you are not careful, you may cause a backlash of the sword will. At that time, vomiting blood and getting injured are considered light. Like them now, they have to move step by step, and move closer. Only when they adapt to the sword will at a long distance, and then move closer little by little. Therefore, many people saw the scene at this moment and just regarded Li Hao as a green-headed person, with a little disdain in their eyes. Li Hao did not pay much attention to the eyes of these guys around him. Li Hao approached the sword wall in front without stopping. When Li Hao entered within 200 feet, he clearly felt that there was a sword will in the space falling on him. Not only was there sword will, but also sword energy. As if to tear him apart. However, Li Hao still didn't care too much about this. He just used the strength of his body to bear the sword intent and sword energy. Even Li Hao didn't use the power of his cultivation at all. Of course, Li Hao could clearly feel that as he approached, the sword intent and sword energy on his body were rapidly becoming stronger, just like the latter he had waited for when he entered the door before, but there were some differences. At a certain moment, Li Hao's body paused. Above the void, it seemed that a terrifying sword was slashing down at him, as if to kill him with one sword. This sword was invisible to the naked eye, invisible, but it seemed to really exist. Boom! The next moment, this powerful sword directly slashed Li Hao's body. Li Hao's reaction was naturally very fast. In an instant, he had already used the strength of his body to the extreme. The Star Demon sword was even held in Li Hao's hand, blocking this invisible sword energy. Li Hao was not injured. However, Li Hao's figure was knocked down from mid-air to the ground. Li Hao's brows slightly frowned, but a sharp light flashed in his eyes. If I hadn't reacted quickly enough, I would have been injured. Li Hao was exactly 100 feet away from his feet. Obviously, this position was a dividing point, and the pressure of the sword intent inside was not comparable to that outside. Hey, this guy is quite strong. He actually endured it? He seems to be fine. The blood-red sword in his hand seems to be quite good. Is this guy a newcomer? He should be an inner disciple. This scene naturally caught the eyes of the Tianxing sect disciples around the sword wall, and a series of uproars came out of their mouths. At this moment, these guys have put away their contempt. From the performance of this guy in front of them, they can see that this guy has some strength. In their guess, even if this guy is a newcomer, he should at least be an inner disciple. Li Hao didn't care about the eyes of the people around him. He stood on the ground, still carrying this huge sword intent, and his expression didn't change much. In this case, let's go in there. Li Hao was not in a hurry. However, at this moment, a sound of breaking through the air came from not far away, which attracted the attention of many people again. Huh? Who is this guy? I haven't seen him either. Is he a newcomer this year? Look at this guy's clothes. This guy is actually a direct disciple. It's him. It's him. He is Ye Lang, the direct disciple just accepted by the master of Tianjian Peak. A rare monster with a top-grade talent and a heavenly Taoist bone. Damn. It turned out to be him. He just entered the door and came for the sword wall. It's really amazing. A figure carrying a sword appeared in front of everyone. It was a young man with a handsome appearance and extraordinary temperament. Suddenly, a series of uproars came from the mouths of these figures around. Especially seeing the robes that the young man was wearing, the people present were immediately surprised. Because the robes that the young man carrying the sword was wearing were the robes of a direct disciple. The disciples of the Tianxing sect all wore sect costumes, and the sect costumes of the Tianxing sect were all white. However, the clothes of disciples of different identities had special words on their chests and backs to distinguish them. As long as they wore sect costumes, the disciples of the Tianxing sect could recognize them at a glance. At this moment, the guy in front of him was a direct disciple, and with his unfamiliar appearance, Some of the guys present recognized the identity of the young man in front of him. Yalang, a new disciple who had just joined the Tianxing sect as a direct disciple, a demon. As soon as Yalang appeared, he attracted the attention of the whole audience. Li Hao was also startled when he saw this guy appearing. He even wore the clothes of a direct disciple of the sect. He looks like a decent person, and this set of clothes looks extraordinary. It should be a good treasure, not stained with dust at all. Li Hao couldn't help muttering in his heart. Then, Li Hao had some doubts again. Where did he get this clothes? Do our errand disciples have it? Just when Li Hao was wondering, Yalang also came directly here. As a sword cultivator, he has longed for the sword wall next to Tianjian Peak. After receiving the identity jade card and sect clothes, he rushed here as soon as possible. Yalang naturally felt the terrifying sword intent coming from the sword wall, and his heart became more and more excited. Yalang looked at so many people under the sword wall who were comprehending the sword intent and practicing. He couldn't help it anymore. He didn't care about anything. He moved and approached the sword wall directly. Similarly, Yalang, like Li Hao just now, didn't move step by step, but came directly on the wind. After a range of 200 feet, Yalang frowned, but he could still accept it. But when he came to 100 feet, boom! Invisibly, Yalang also truly felt the terrifying sword slashing down at him, which directly gave him a sense of facing death. Yalang's reaction was naturally very fast. At the same time as the power of the middle-grade celestial being's cultivation burst out, a strong sword intent also burst out from Yalang's body. The long sword was also held in his hand, and then he swung it directly at the falling sword. Bang! Invisibly, the whole space seemed to vibrate, and a dull sound burst out. Everyone saw that Yalang's body was smashed directly to the ground. Yalang stabilized his body with difficulty, his face had become a little ugly, and even the corners of his mouth twitched. At this moment, Yalang, even wearing the robes of a direct disciple, looked a little embarrassed, and there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Obviously, he had been injured a little, but it should be fine. Yalang wiped the blood from his mouth, his eyes fell on the sword wall, but his eyes burst out with a sharp light. But the next moment, Yalang felt someone was looking at him and turned his head away. I seem to have seen you somewhere before. Yalang looked at Li Hao and felt that the guy in front of him looked familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. Are you new here too? Yalang asked Li Hao, glancing at him calmly. Yes. What? Is there a problem? Li Hao replied indifferently, but without any expression, neither salty nor bland. Yalang, who heard Li Hao's words, felt a little uncomfortable. Het. Yalang sneered, and then said proudly, I remember, you are the errand boy who didn't take the test. Haha, are you also a sword cultivator? If you are not a sword cultivator, I still advise you that this is not the place for you to come. As soon as Yalang said this, a stone stirred up thousands of waves. What? This guy is an errand boy. No test. Why not take the test? To be able to walk to that 100 feet, at least he should have the talent of an inner disciple. When the disciples of the Tianxing sect around heard Yalang's words, they immediately gave birth to extremely surprised voices, and their eyes fell on Li Hao. For Li Hao, Yalang didn't take the guy in front of him seriously at all, and he had a touch of pride in his bones. When Li Hao heard what the other party said, his eyes froze slightly, but his expression did not change much. Li Hao did not care much about the verbal attacks. If this guy was ignorant enough to provoke him and attack him, he would let him know that in his eyes, the direct disciple was nothing. Fortunately, the guy in front of him did not attack. The sword intent on this sword wall is not something that anyone can comprehend. God level tip, report the walking 500,000 at the beginning. Author, Tien Tien Taido. Chapter 595. The sword intent on this sword wall is not something that anyone can comprehend. Yalang said proudly, as if he didn't take Li Hao seriously at all. After that, Yalang faced the sword wall in front of him again in the eyes of everyone. What is he going to do? Everyone couldn't help but ask in their hearts. The next moment. Boom. Everyone saw that from Yalang's body, a powerful cultivation momentum instantly burst out. At the same time, a powerful sword intent swept out from Yalang. The sword intent directly turned into an energy shield, protecting Yalang in it. Then, Yalang stepped forward and entered within 100 feet. The terrifying sword intent descended on Yalang, but it was resisted by his own sword intent. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Yalang continued to walk forward, and soon he went to the side of the people sitting in the front. The people at the front were all the swordsmanship geniuses of the Tianxing section. When they noticed Yalang coming up from behind, they couldn't help but cast a surprised look. Sitting cross-legged at the front was a woman wearing the same white robe as Yalang, and she was also a direct disciple. She was the second disciple of the master of Tianjian Peak, and her name was Su Man. As a direct disciple of the master of Tianjian Peak, and having been a disciple for decades, Su Man's cultivation had reached the level of Golden Immortal. A 5th grade Golden Immortal was not much inferior to some of the sex deacons. At the level of Golden Immortal, the realm was no longer simply divided into 3 grades, but 9 grades. There was a huge span of cultivation between each grade, and at this level, cultivation had become somewhat slow. If there was no chance against the heavens or enlightenment, sometimes it would take several years or even 10 years to improve a small grade. Su Man is also a genius in swordsmanship. Her body has the body of swordsmanship, and she has comprehended her own swordsmanship will. But even so, she has been comprehending under the sword wall for more than 3 years, but she still has not completely comprehended the swordsmanship will on this sword wall. Su Man knows that the swordsmanship will on this sword wall must have been left by a powerful swordsman above Xianxian. If she can comprehend it, her swordsmanship level will probably go up another level. And she is also the one who has the most hope to comprehend the existence of this swordsmanship will among the people present. Of course, she has not gained nothing in the past 3 years of comprehension. Her cultivation has been improved from the 3rd grade Golden Immortal to the 5th grade Xianxian, and her swordsmanship body has been tempered more powerfully, reaching the point of unity between man and sword. At this moment, the guy who appeared behind her attracted Su Man's attention, especially the clothes he was wearing, which showed that this guy named Yalang was a new disciple of her master, that is, her junior brother. Yalang was seen approaching the sword wall step by step. At a certain moment, Yalang finally stopped. He had not yet reached Su Man's position. His cultivation was not as high as Su Man's, so he could only stay a little further away. Let's do it here. Even if it's not very close, it's enough. Yalang said slowly, with a strong confidence in his voice. The next moment, under the gaze of everyone, Yalang sat down cross-legged. At the moment when Yalang sat down cross-legged, the sword shield on Yalang was directly removed by him. What is he going to do? Just when everyone was confused, Yalang's body burst out with brilliant sword light again. Then, Yalang let the sword intent on the sword wall fall on him. Then, everyone saw a shocking scene. The moment the sword intent on the sword wall fell on him, Yalang's body seemed to become illusory at this moment, and his whole body was like a long sword with brilliant light, especially at his heart, there seemed to be a small sword, which exuded a strange power, and introduced the sword intent on the sword wall into Yalang's body, but it did not cause any harm to Yalang. In this way, the sword intent on Yalang became more and more powerful, and his momentum became more and more overwhelming, as if he had become one with the sword intent on the sword wall. Sword heart. He has a sword heart. What? Sword heart? Clear sword heart. Another sword demon. Dot. When everyone saw what happened to Yelang, they exclaimed again. Sword heart. The heart of sword Dao. It is also called the clear sword heart. This is a kind of sword talent, just like Su Man has the body of sword Dao, which can turn the body into a sword, almost ignoring the sword intent and sword energy. The same is true for the Tongming sword heart, which can give the owner an extraordinary talent for understanding the sword. There is no doubt that Yelang has the Tongming sword heart. With the blessing of this Tongming sword heart, Yelang's understanding of the sword intent on the sword wall has become twice the result with half the effort. Tongming sword heart. No wonder the master accepted him as a disciple. In front, Shen Man saw the scene and her face was solemn. Although she was a sword body, she was not as good as Tongming sword heart in understanding the power of the sword. She has not been able to successfully comprehend the sword intent on the sword wall for more than 3 years. Could this guy succeed? But it seems that it will not succeed in a short time, at least not in a day or two, even if it is the sword heart. Sword heart. Li Hao's eyes fell on Yelang's body at this moment, muttering, no wonder he was so arrogant and didn't take himself seriously, he did have a little capital. However, it was only a little capital. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Li Hao's mouth, but a sharp edge burst out of his eyes. The next moment, Li Hao also stepped out and went forward. Li Hao did not exert any power of cultivation, allowing the powerful sword intent on the sword wall to fall on him. This sword intent seemed to tear Li Hao apart, but was resisted by Li Hao's powerful body. 1 step, 2 steps. Li Hao was surprised to find that under the effect of this sword will, his physical strength became a little stronger. In other words, this sword intent was actually tempering Li Hao's body. Sword intent tempering body. Although he felt some pain, Li Hao could clearly feel that within this short period of time, his physical body had directly reached a higher level. With his current physical strength, even without using the power of cultivation, he would probably be able to crush the cultivators of the same realm. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. God level tip, report the walking 500,000 at the beginning. Author, Tian Taido. Chapter 596. Li Hao tempered his body with sword intent. In just a moment, Li Hao found that his physical strength became stronger and reached a higher level. This was a pleasant surprise. Soon, Li Hao also came to the side of Yelang and sat down cross-legged. In front of the two, there was only the woman named Su Man. Li Hao could have continued to move forward, but Li Hao did not do so. Low profile. It is better to be low-key. Making a fortune in silence is the kingly way. He is just a small errand disciple. Looking at the sword wall in front of him and feeling the supreme sword intent, Li Hao's eyes also flashed with a gleam of brilliance. If he could comprehend the sword intent, his swordsmanship level would probably reach another level. Without saying anything, Li Hao directly began to comprehend the sword intent, allowing this sword intent to wash over his body and even enter his body. However, in the next moment, something happened that Li Hao was very unexpected. When this sword intent entered his body, the supreme Dao bone in his body seemed to be attracted at this moment, as if it saw something that attracted it, and then it was stimulated. Li Hao only saw that this Dao bone in his body was spinning rapidly in his body space, and there were magical runes on the Dao bone shining. In an instant, a supreme power suddenly spread out from this Dao bone. Boom! The next moment, Li Hao felt that his whole body was shocked, and his body seemed to become ethereal under the effect of this magical power. On the surface of Li Hao's body and inside his clothes, some strange Dao patterns appeared. Dao pattern. At this moment, Li Hao felt that his body had undergone a transformation. Then, Li Hao clearly felt that the sword intent entered his body and merged with his body. Not only that, even his divine product full attribute talent seemed to be stimulated. Boom. In the next moment, Li Hao was shocked. The scene in front of him changed immediately. All the figures disappeared, even the towering sword wall in front of him disappeared. At this moment, Li Hao seemed to be in a starry sky, and there was only a towering shadow in the universe in front of him. This shadow stood there, standing tall and upright, as if it was the core of this world. The shadow's appearance could not be seen clearly. But what could be seen was that in the hands of this shadow, it seemed to be holding a beautiful woman. The woman was motionless, as if she had lost her vitality. And this woman seemed to be the man's beloved. The man roared to the sky when his beloved died. God, why do you want to take her away? I promised you a prosperous life, but I haven't seen it yet. Why do you want to leave me? No. Come back to me. Why can't I save you no matter how high my cultivation is? I don't want you to leave. The man only heard endless roars and unwillingness. The man's extraordinary cultivation power was activated, and infinite vitality was desperately input into the body of the woman in his arms. However, the woman remained motionless, and her body was still full of death. In other words, the woman was completely dead, and even her soul was scattered. No matter how much vitality he input into the woman's body, it was useless. Li Hao was like a bystander, watching this scene quietly, but he could clearly feel the man's anger, unwillingness, and powerlessness. Everything was like being there, extremely real. Li Hao also became a little angry and unwilling, which resonated with him. The man in front of him had reached an extremely high level of cultivation. Standing in the starry sky, he seemed to be the great Dao. But even so, he could only watch his beloved woman die, unable to save her. If the heaven wants you to die, you must die, unless the heaven is destroyed. The next moment, Li Hao saw that the man looked up at the void again and made an angry voice. I won't allow you to leave. The man roared and said to the heaven. If the heaven wants you to leave, I will cut the sky. I don't know when, a long sword has appeared in the hand of this man. Then, the man slashed at the sky with the sword. The sword slashed out, which contained the power of the world, and directly cut the entire sky into two pieces, and the void collapsed. The sky collapsed, the sun and the moon lost their light, and the world was destroyed by this sword. This sword was so powerful and terrifying. However, even with such a terrifying sword, it still couldn't wake up the woman in his arms. In the dark, there seemed to be a force acting on this woman. It was invisible and intangible, but it was real, as if all living beings could not avoid this force. This was the power of the great Dao, the power of reincarnation. In the invisible, there seemed to be a shackle that imprisoned life. The sword that contained his powerful cultivation did not get the desired result, and still did not wake up the person in his arms. The man suddenly felt a strong unwillingness. Boom! The next moment, a ray of incomparable determination burst out from the man's eyes, and an incomparable and powerful cultivation power burst out instantly. His cultivation has already reached the peak, but even so, it still seems a little small and insignificant at this moment. If the Tao wants you to die, I will destroy the Tao. Then, the man roared again. Then, the man's body was once again filled with an extremely frightened aura, and his cultivation power, which had just been fully exerted, rose again at this moment. At the same time, his black hair turned pale at a speed visible to the naked eye. This is the price of burning vitality in exchange for a more powerful cultivation. Puff! A large mouthful of blood spurted out of the man's mouth, but he was not moved at all. His face also became old, but at this moment, his cultivation realm soared to another level again. This level, above the heaven and earth, can be said to be standing at the true peak. Although he had gained this power at the cost of burning his vitality, he had no regrets. For the woman in his arms, what was vitality, life, and death, and immortality. At this moment, he finally understood. Nothing was more important than waking up the woman in his arms. I would find you no matter how hard I tried. I didn't care about life and death, and I would do it if I didn't accept it. At this moment, he didn't accept the heaven or the great way. The heaven had been cut, but the way had not been destroyed. Then, the man slashed at the void with a sword. Puff! The man spurted out another mouthful of blood. This sword condensed all his strength, even his vitality, but he looked firm and fearless. This sword was ordinary. However, when this sword was slashed, it seemed as if a shackle was cut open in the invisible, as if a road was cut into pieces. This road is called reincarnation. As the sword fell, the whole world was shattered. Li Hao felt the powerful sword intent of the two swords slashed by the man, and his heart was trembling to the extreme, especially the latter sword, which had the power to destroy the Tao. This scene seemed to have happened in the past, but at this moment, Li Hao seemed to be pulled back to the past, feeling the power of this sword. God level tip, report the walking 500,000 at the beginning. Author, Tian Taido. Chapter 597. Li Hao seemed to have returned to the past, and personally comprehended the unparalleled elegance of the sword that had appeared. In fact, at this moment, Li Hao's body was still sitting cross-legged in front of the sword wall of Tianxing sect, quietly comprehending. I don't know if it was because of the supreme Dao bone or the god-level talent, Li Hao personally experienced the sword that had appeared before, as if Li Hao had cut it himself. Not far from Li Hao, Ye Lang also saw Li Hao, and a strange look appeared in his eyes, but he still didn't care too much, and still didn't take Li Hao seriously. He still relied on the advantages brought by his clear sword heart to carefully comprehend the sword intent on the sword wall, hoping to resonate with the sword intent. In front, the woman named Su Man was the same. In their opinion, they were the real sword geniuses, and only they could comprehend the sword intent on the sword wall. However, what they didn't notice was, at this moment, a faint sword light appeared on the sword wall. The next moment, buzz buzz buzz. This sword wall actually trembled endlessly at this moment. Not only the sword wall, but it seemed that the whole earth was shaking. This scene happened very abruptly, and no one expected it. What's going on? What happened? What's the situation? At this moment, everyone made a sound of surprise and looked at the scene in front of them in shock, but they seemed a little confused. Then, they were shocked to see again. On the sword wall in front of them, there was a dazzling sword light. Boom boom boom. Sword energy descended from the sword wall, and the sword energy continued to flow and soar in the entire space. In just a blink of an eye, the space in front of the sword wall was filled with these sword energy. The sword energy lingered, turned into sword light all over the sky, and turned into a huge sword energy storm, directly covering the entire space. All this happened very quickly, so quickly that many people hadn't reacted yet. This huge sword energy storm had already enveloped the entire space, including them. Sizzle. Endless sword energy swept through the space, tearing it apart. Some sword energy even directly acted on the Tianxing sect disciples who were comprehending the sword wall and sword intent. Ah! Who can tell me what's going on? Immediately, there were frightened voices coming out of these figures. This sudden scene caused these Tianxing sect disciples to suffer immediately. They had to use their cultivation power to form a protection around their bodies to resist the sudden sword energy storm. Even if they wanted to escape from the sword energy storm, they couldn't do it. All this made them very confused. They had no idea what was going on. Moreover, because of the existence of the sword energy storm, the endless and dazzling sword light blocked their sight. They could not see the specific situation at all. They could only feel that the center of the sword energy storm seemed to be the figures who were comprehending the sword. And when this sword energy storm was born, On the peaks of the Tianxing sect and in the palace, some towering figures were also shocked at this moment. The sword wall is triggered. Who is it? Who triggered the sword intent on the sword wall? There were surprised voices coming from some places in the Tianxing section at this moment. Even the big guys of the Xianxian level were shocked by this scene. One after another, powerful divine consciousness suddenly descended on the scene where the sword wall was located to investigate, but when their divine consciousness touched the sword energy storm, they were still blocked outside. There were even some strong men who directly descended to the place where the sword wall was located, but they could still only see the huge sword energy storm in front of them, but could not see the specific situation in the sword energy storm. But without exception, they all had an intuition at this moment. The sword energy storm in front of them must have been caused by the power on the sword wall being triggered by someone. Who exactly triggered the sword wall? Or, understood the sword intent on the sword wall? In the sword energy storm, Li Hao seemed to be still immersed in the past picture. As the sword was slashed down, the whole world was broken with the sword after the sword broke the shackles of the avenue. Faintly, Li Hao also understood something. Cut the sky, destroy the way. Li Hao muttered, opened his eyes, and broke free from the past picture. The figure was gone, and he didn't know what the result was after the figure slashed the sword, whether he was still alive, and whether he saved the woman in his arms. And if it were me, would I be the same as him in such a situation? This picture lingered in Li Hao's mind, and this sword was also deeply remembered by Li Hao. I understand. Li Hao understands. Is this the sword intent on the stone wall? Li Hao looked forward, and a gleam of light flashed in his eyes. At this moment, Ye Lang, who was not far ahead, seemed to sense something. Ye Lang had already drawn the sword intent into his body, but now he felt that the sword intent seemed to leave his body in an instant, and then flowed directly into another figure in front of him. At the same time, the sword energy storm in the surrounding space also suddenly dissipated. Seeing that figure, Ye Lang stood up suddenly. Is it him? How could it be him? How is this possible? Ye Lang saw that the figure was actually the guy he had completely despised before, and a look of disbelief suddenly appeared in his eyes. Illusion, this must be an illusion. Ye Lang calmed down and thought that he was dazzled, and the sword light just now was also very likely that he saw it wrong. Around everything returned to calm, as if nothing had happened. Everyone looked at each other, looking at each other, with a confused look on their faces. The sword energy storm is gone? What's going on? Everyone, look at the sword wall. The sword wall. Oh my God, the sword wall is cracked. How could this happen? The next moment, everyone made extremely horrified sounds again. Some people's eyes fell on the sword wall, but they saw that the originally towering sword wall actually had a crack in the middle at this moment. A huge crack. The crack went from top to bottom and penetrated all the way to the bottom. And the sword intent on the sword wall was gone. Buzz buzz buzz. In the next moment, the crack on the sword wall became bigger and bigger. Boom. At a certain moment, the sword wall collapsed directly. God level tip, report the walking 500,000 at the beginning. Author, Tian Taido. Chapter 598. The sword wall collapsed. The sword intent on the sword wall also disappeared. This sudden scene made everyone stare with eyes wide open, unable to believe it. How could this happen? The sword wall actually collapsed. The sword intent is gone too. Doesn't that mean that we can't comprehend the sword intent on it in the future? The voices of exclamation kept coming out of the mouths of these Tianxing sect disciples. They couldn't accept the scene before them. The sword wall, a treasure land for comprehending the sword in the Tianxing sect, just disappeared. Who is it? Who is it? Someone said angrily. They realized the key point. The reason why the sword wall is like this is probably because of the sword intent. Who comprehended the sword intent? The next moment, these people's eyes kept scanning the scene. Then, someone set his eyes on the figures in the front. If we were to ask who in the field was most likely to comprehend the sword intent on the sword wall, it would definitely be the people in the front. And these people were all shrouded in the sword energy storm just now, making it difficult for people to see their specific situation. However, at this moment, even Su-man, who was in the front, seemed a little unbelievable. How could this happen? Su-man murmured, feeling unwilling in her heart. She had comprehended the sword intent for 3 years at this moment, and even thought that she would completely comprehend it. However, she never thought that someone else would get there first. Su-man couldn't help but look at the people behind her again, wanting to know who caused the scene in front of her. Not only him, but others were the same. In the next moment, some people's eyes fell on Yelang. Why is Yelang standing? He was the only one standing, and everyone else was sitting. Moreover, Yelang's aura was particularly amazing, as if he had just realized something from the sword wall. Seeing this, everyone's heart skipped a beat. Is it him? Ah! It's him, it's him, it's him. Before he came, the sword wall was fine, but it collapsed as soon as he came. It must be him. And, he has a clear sword heart, so he must have realized the sword meaning on the sword wall. Some people couldn't help but exclaimed, and their eyes looked at Yelang differently. A new disciple, a demonic sword talent, a clear sword heart, an extraordinary aura, and the only one standing in the whole venue. The sword wall collapsed as soon as he came. All of this makes it hard not to suspect that the collapse of the sword wall was caused by this guy called Yelang. Most likely it was this guy. Most likely, rounding it off, that's 100%. At this moment, everyone's eyes fell on Yelang. There was no doubt that Yelang became the focus of the whole scene. Even Su-man was staring at Yelang closely, revealing a look of deep belief. Even some high-ranking members of the Tianxing sect also appeared at this moment. After scanning the circle and finding nothing unusual, they also set their eyes on Yelang. What? I comprehended the sword intent? I collapsed the sword wall. Seeing everyone's eyes and hearing these people's voices, Yelang was stunned and dumbfounded. That was not me. Yelang opened his mouth and wanted to explain. Who else could it be if not you? Everyone saw it? However, before Yelang could explain, the voices of the crowd kept ringing. Yelang was speechless and choked. The next moment, Yelang looked at Li Hao, who was not far away. Just now in the sword energy storm, he saw that the opponent seemed to have a terrifying aura, and the terrifying sword energy lingered around him, and there were also Dao runes. Although he didn't see it very clearly, he didn't dare to be sure, but he had a strong intuition that the collapse of the sword wall was definitely related to the guy in front of him, not himself. Thinking of this, Yelang suddenly shuddered. It's him. It's him. He comprehended the sword intent on the sword wall. Yelang said loudly, pointing at Li Hao. At this moment, the eyes of the whole audience fell on Li Hao because of Yelang's voice. There was doubt in everyone's eyes. Li Hao's heart suddenly skipped a beat by this scene. The sword intent on the sword wall was indeed comprehended by him, and the sword wall did collapse after the sword intent was comprehended. However, Li Hao naturally couldn't be stupid enough to admit it directly. Being low-key is the kingly way. Moreover, there is no definite evidence, and the sword storm just now obscured everything. Li Hao immediately jumped up. Brother, you said I understood the sword intent? You must be kidding. I am just a new errant disciple, how can I understand such a supreme sword intent? You are a direct disciple, even you can't understand the sword intent, how can I understand it? Then you are too weak as a direct disciple, right? Just let me be the direct disciple. Don't talk nonsense. If you understand it, then understand it, don't deny it. Li Hao said a lot of sentences in a row, which made Ye Lang's face black. That's right, don't deny it. You are a direct disciple, and you say that others have realized it? Do you think everyone will believe it? It must be you. You don't need to explain. Explanation is just quibbling. The disciples of Tianxing sect around heard Li Hao's words and said one after another, expressing their agreement with Li Hao's words. When Ye Lang heard these words, he didn't know what to say and was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Ye Lang. But at this moment, a magnificent voice came, resounding throughout the world. When everyone heard this voice, they couldn't help but be shocked again. This was the voice of the master of Tianjian Peak. Come to Tianjian Peak. Yes, master. Ye Lang heard the voice and responded. Then, Ye Lang looked at Li Hao deeply. I will remember you. Ye Lang said to Li Hao fiercely. The next moment, he flew up on his sword and headed towards Tianjian Peak. He. Hearing this, Li Hao smiled faintly and didn't care at all. What Li Hao cares about is his own cultivation. After Li Hao had just comprehended the sword intent, he had already entered the realm of the upper grade earthly immortal, and was only one step away from the heavenly immortal. Tianxing sect is indeed a sect of immortals with a profound foundation. Li Hao had just entered the sect and had such a powerful opportunity, although he had wasted a treasure land of the sect for comprehending the sword. Li Hao was in a good mood and was ready to leave here immediately. Tianxing sect has so many good places, not just the sword wall. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. God level tip, report the walking 500,000 at the beginning. Author, Tian Taido. Chapter 599. Just as Li Hao was about to leave, a woman's voice came into Li Hao's ears again. Wait a moment. Li Hao followed the voice and saw a pair of beautiful eyes looking straight at him. The next moment, a beautiful woman came to Li Hao. Sister, is there anything else you can do? Li Hao said doubtfully to the woman in front of him. The woman in front of him was none other than the woman who was originally closest to the sword wall. The person who had the most hope of understanding the sword's meaning on the sword wall was Su Man, the second disciple of the master of Tianjian Peak. Are you a new junior brother? Su Man asked Li Hao. Li Hao nodded, not knowing what the woman in front of him was going to do. Common servant disciple. I heard Su Man ask again. Yes, senior sister, is there any problem? Li Hao was startled and said calmly that he didn't care at all about his identity as a handyman disciple. Identity or something, just a false name. You shouldn't be just a handyman disciple. Su Man said calmly, looking at Li Hao with an inexplicable look in his eyes. When Li Hao heard this, his expression became condensed. The Su Man in front of him seemed to have noticed something, just like the previous Ye Lang. But so what? Li Hao still didn't pay much attention. Haha. If senior sister has nothing else to do, I'll leave first. I've just entered the sect and there are still many things I don't know about. Li Hao smiled faintly again and took steps to leave. Looking at this scene, Su Man's beautiful eyes flashed with a glint of light. For some reason, Su Man always felt that the young man in front of him was extraordinary. Perhaps this was his intuition as a monster. This guy should definitely not be just an ordinary handyman disciple. At this moment, the guy in front of him was already on Su Man's mind, so he had to pay close attention to him when he turned around. Just as Su Man was thinking this, the guy in front of him who was about to leave actually stopped again, turned around and asked, by the way, senior sister, please ask, the handyman disciples should also have sect uniforms, right? Yeah. That's right. What's wrong? Su Man couldn't help but be startled and said. Can I ask, where can I get it? I only heard Li Hao say weakly. Hearing Li Hao's words, Su Man understood immediately, glared at Li Hao, and said in a deep voice, I'll take you there. That's great. Thank you, senior sister. When Li Hao heard this, he immediately smiled and said. When he first entered the sect, he was not very familiar with the top and bottom of Tianxing section. It was naturally a great thing to have a beautiful senior sister to guide him. Follow me. I only heard Su Man say something without looking back, and then his figure rose directly into the wind and headed towards a mountain in the distance. When Li Hao saw this scene, he quickly rose up with his sword and chased after Su Man's figure. After a while, Su Man took Li Hao to the door of a main hall built on the edge of a cliff. Miscellaneous Hall. The name of this hall is these two words. At the door, there is a strong man wearing elder's clothes guarding him. He is a middle-aged man who looks to be in his 40s or 50s. He has a detached temperament. Although his cultivation is not revealed, he has a systematic system. Li Hao, of course, could tell at a glance that the middle-aged man in front of him was a powerful being at the level of a golden immortal, an 8th grade golden immortal. Master Nephew Su, why do you have time to come to my miscellaneous hall today? As soon as Su Man and the two approached, the middle-aged man's voice came. Su Man was the second disciple of Tianji Peak, so he was naturally very familiar with it. Elder Song, he is a new disciple. I will bring him here to receive his clothes and his jade identity badge. Su Man said to the middle-aged man, this elder's surname is Song. When the elder heard Su Man's words, his expression couldn't help but condense, and his eyes fell on the young man following Su Man. Su Man actually brought a new disciple here to get clothes? This is an unprecedented first time. This guy actually attracted Su Man so much. Could it be? Elder Song looked at Li Hao, a gleam flashed in his eyes, and he thought to himself. This guy is really good looking, with extraordinary temperament and good looks. It is reasonable for Su Man to like him. Matter? Name? Elder Song asked calmly immediately. He had already received the roster of new disciples. Whether they were direct disciples or servant disciples, he would know as long as they reported their names. Li Hao. When Li Hao heard this, he immediately reported his name. The next moment, a jade tablet appeared in Elder Song's hand. He seemed to be searching for something on the jade tablet. Huh? Are you a handyman? After a while, Elder Song's face showed another strange color. He found Li Hao's name, but it showed that the other party was just a handyman disciple, and he suddenly felt doubtful in his heart. Yes, I am a handyman disciple. Li Hao smiled casually and said calmly without caring at all. When the elder heard Li Hao's confirmation, his heart couldn't help but condense again, but he didn't say anything more and looked at Li Hao deeply. The next moment, a set of white clothes appeared on the table in front of him. Next to the clothes, there is a jade token. Take it, this is your clothes, and the identity jade token. The jade token can be used with the first drop of blood. Thank you, elder. Li Hao took the clothes and thanked the elder. Then, without any hesitation, Li Hao squeezed a drop of blood from his fingertips and dripped it on the jade token. Suddenly, Li Hao clearly felt that there was a connection between him and the jade token. Not only that, through the jade token, Li Hao could sense the existence of many familiar auras around him. And those auras were other disciples or sect masters of the Tianxing sect. In other words, this identity jade token can be connected with other jade tokens. This jade token is a symbol of our identity. Even if there is a distance between the jade tokens, communication can be carried out. If you encounter danger, you can use this jade token to ask for help from the section. Be sure to keep it well. Next to him, Su Man's voice came again, telling Li Hao the function of the identity jade token. Yeah. Li Hao responded and put away the identity jade card. Afterwards, Li Hao put on the clothes of the menial disciple. The white robe is also a magic weapon. It may not be as good as those worn by the core disciples or the direct disciples, but it still has the effect of windproof and dustproof, and it is also very comfortable to wear. God level tip, report the walking 500,000 at the beginning. Author, Tian Tian Taido. Chapter 600. As the saying goes, people rely on clothes, and Buddha relies on gold. Li Hao, wearing this sex clothes, coupled with his already handsome appearance, has directly taken his temperament to a higher level, making him even more transcendent and extraordinary. Although it is just a piece of clothing worn by a handyman disciple, and its quality is not as good as those worn by direct disciples and core disciples, it is still a magic weapon. At this moment, Li Hao looked a bit more like a disciple of the immortal sect. After receiving the identity jade badge and clothes, Li Hao was truly a disciple of the Tianxing sect. What are your plans next? At a certain moment, Su Man suddenly asked Li Hao again. What other plans can we have? Naturally, we should get familiar with our Tianxing sect again, and then practice well in the sect. When Li Hao heard Su Man's words, he couldn't help but be startled and said directly. I mean, do you want to consider doing something for me? I heard Su Man say to Li Hao again. Li Hao? Li Hao was a little confused and didn't understand what Su Man meant. Perhaps seeing Li Hao's doubts, Su Man slowly spoke again. Do you know, handyman disciples, that the sect will not give you anything except the set of clothes and a jade identity tag? I know that. When Li Hao heard this, he said lightly that he knew it before he did the test. It's equivalent to the fact that you don't have any resources in the section spiritual stones, Taoism, etc., you have to earn them yourself. Su Man continued. Li Hao nodded, naturally he knew this. I only heard Su Man continue to say, and many handyman disciples, in order to survive in the immortal sect, choose to do things for some core disciples or direct disciples. If you help me with things, I can give you a huge gain. To put it bluntly, it is equivalent to Li Hao helping Su Man do things, and Su Man paying Li Hao a salary. Haha. Let's forget it. We don't need it for the time being. When Li Hao heard this, he smiled lightly and said directly. He refused without any hesitation. Li Hao has no shortage of spiritual stones or anything else. All right. When Su Man heard what Li Hao said, he didn't force it, and then said to Li Hao. If you need me, come to me then. Good. Li Hao smiled and responded, you don't need it now, and you may not need it later, but Li Hao feels that the Su Manren is pretty good and you can hand it over. As the saying goes, many friends lead to many paths. In this unfamiliar sect, it is easy to have many friends. Afterwards, Su Man left and returned to Tianjian Peak. Li Hao, on the other hand, decided to visit other places in the sect. However, just when Li Hao walked out of this miscellaneous hall, an old man in green clothes appeared in front of Li Hao, blocking Li Hao's way. The old man looked at Li Hao with a smile. Li Hao looked at the old man in front of him and frowned. This old man's clothes are very ordinary, he looks like a mortal old man, and there is no fluctuation in the power of the immortal spirit on his body. The most important thing is that Li Hao's system interface does not even show the old man's specific cultivation level. You must know that in the past, he could easily see the other party's cultivation level when he was in the system. The same is true even if it is several levels higher. But in front of him, he couldn't see through the cultivation level of the old man in green, which meant that the cultivation level of the old man in front of him was absolutely terrifying. This is indeed the case. At this moment the old man appeared in front of Li Hao. An exclamation mark actually appeared on the old man's head. That's right, the prompt is here again. Seeing this prompt, Li Hao was overjoyed. If there was a prompt, there would be a reward. Li Hao was quite looking forward to the rewards from the system. The next moment, Li Hao clicked on the prompt on the old man's head without hesitation. Ding dong, the old man in front of you has an extraordinary identity, and his cultivation level is also incredible. If the host becomes his disciple, the harvest will be extraordinary. The system prompt message came, asking Li Hao to become the old man's disciple. In fact, Li Hao has no intention of becoming a disciple at all. With the system in place, he can just keep a low profile and improve his cultivation. Is there any need to become a disciple? But since the system said so, Li Hao had no choice but to do it. Mainly, there are rewards. But, will the old man in front of him accept him? Let's see what this old man is going to do first, right? Senior, what's the matter? Li Hao tried to ask. The old man still looked at Li Hao with a smile, without speaking, but stood in front of Li Hao. Seeing this scene, Li Hao was a little speechless. He blocked the road and didn't speak. That's right, if you want to become a disciple, just say it clearly. But if you want to take the initiative to become a disciple, that is impossible. There is a difference between active and passive. If there is nothing wrong with senior, then the disciple will leave first. Li Hao said weakly to the old man. He always felt that the old man was a little uneasy and kind-hearted. After the words fell, Li Hao was about to go around. However, at this moment, boy, do I let you go? Do you care if you collapse the sword wall of my Tianxing sect? The old man in green spoke, and what he said shocked Li Hao's heart. How did the other party know that it was him who collapsed the sword wall? But soon, Li Hao calmed down. This is unfounded. Senior, you said that I collapsed the sword wall? How is this possible? How can Hida, a boy with such little cultivation, be able to collapse the sword wall? Are you mistaken? It's not me. It's definitely not me. Don't admit it? I'll kill you if you don't admit it. Whoever admits it is a fool. What can't the other party do to you? Wrong? Humph. After hearing Li Hao's words, the old man snorted coldly. I can't be mistaken. The old man in green said with great certainty. The next moment, he looked at Li Hao with a sneer. Boy, you don't admit it? You want to keep a low profile, right? Do you believe that I will let everyone in the sect know about this later? Do you think they believe in me or you? Moreover, that Dao in your body bones, I'm afraid they are also extraordinary. Threaten. The threat of Chi Kuakyo. When Li Hao heard this, his whole face turned dark. The other party actually detected the Dao bone in his body. This was simply terrifying. You must know that his Dao bone was the supreme Dao bone rewarded by the system. Senior, there's no need to be like this, right? I'm just an ordinary handyman disciple. Li Hao said with a grimace, truly speechless. If you fight, you can't defeat the other party. With the other party's cultivation level, he might be able to crush you with just one finger. Moreover, Li Hao didn't know the identity of the other party, but he was definitely not too ordinary. Senior, just say, is there anything you need me to do? As long as I can do it, I will never refuse. Li Hao said directly to the old man in green. People under the eaves have to bow their heads. I guess you are quite sensible. Seeing this scene, the old man nodded slightly, expressing his satisfaction. Immediately, I heard the old man say slowly, I'm going out for the next 2 days, and I need a janitor at home. Okay, kid, let's go and guard the door for senior. God level tip, report the walking 500,000 at the beginning. Author, Tian Tian Taido. Chapter 601. Li Hao agreed. When you are under someone's roof, you have to bow your head. Besides, Li Hao is worried about having no place to live, so this is just right. At least being a doorman provides food and accommodation, right? By the way, senior, where do you live? Li Hao asked the old man in green in front of him. Tianxin Pavilion. The old man said slowly, and then said to Li Hao, I am leaving now, there is no time to lose, you go and see it now. No problem. Li Hao said in a deep voice. Then, the old man in green turned around and flew up in the wind. By the way, senior, where is Tianxin Pavilion? Li Hao looked at the scene and suddenly remembered to ask. However, the old man had already turned into a wisp of green smoke and dissipated in the sky, without answering Li Hao. Just when Li Hao felt helpless, a ray of spiritual light fell from the sky and was directly caught by Li Hao. It turned out to be a jade card. On one side of the jade card were some strange patterns, and on the other side was a golden dragon. The pattern of the golden dragon was lifelike. Li Hao couldn't help but be shocked when he looked at the pattern. This jade card is probably not ordinary. This should be something like a certificate left by the old man in green. Although he was called by him to guard the door, words are not enough. This golden dragon jade card is the certificate to prove that he is not an illegal intruder. You know, he is just a Chore's disciple, even in the Tianxing sect, he can't go to all places. Putting away the golden dragon jade card, Li Hao went straight to the depths of the sect. Li Hao didn't know where this Tianxin Pavilion was in the Tianxing section from the name. This Tianxin Pavilion should be an attic. He could only walk one step at a time. If he couldn't find it, he would have to ask for directions. After wandering for a long time, Li Hao wandered around most of the Tianxing sect, but still couldn't find the location of the Tianxin Pavilion. Well, I can only come up with the worst plan. Let's ask someone. Li Hao looked around the sky and saw streams of light passing between the peaks, and some figures flying in the wind, with extraordinary temperament. These people are all disciples of the Tianxing section. They are all busy with their own affairs and trying every means to improve their cultivation strength. Soon, Li Hao saw a target. It was a red and beautiful figure standing on a blue bird, facing the wind. Although it was just a back figure, it was particularly eye-catching. It was her. Li Hao said nothing, and his figure flew up directly and chased after the figure. Soon, Li Hao came to the back of the red-dressed woman. Fairy sister, please stay. Li Hao shouted directly to the front. Hearing Li Hao's voice, the red-dressed woman in front stopped, and the blue bird flapped its wings and stood in the void. The woman frowned slightly and turned her head to look at Li Hao. Li Hao then saw that in front of him was an extremely beautiful face, with delicate facial features that were natural and flawless, and without makeup, she had a charming charm that made people's heart beat. Is there something? The woman in red asked Li Hao lightly, and there seemed to be no emotion in her voice, especially when she looked at the clothes Li Hao was wearing. Her eyes were more and more distant. Errand disciple? However, this guy is pretty good looking. Fairy sister, please ask, where is Tianxin Pavilion? Li Hao asked the woman in red directly. Hearing Li Hao's question, the woman's eyebrows frowned even deeper. Why are you asking about Tianxin Pavilion? The woman in red asked Li Hao coldly. I want to go. Li Hao said lightly. This Tianxin Pavilion is not a place you can go. However, the woman in red continued. Why? This time, it was Li Hao who frowned and asked in confusion. Are you a new disciple this year? The red-dressed woman looked at Li Hao again and asked. Yeah. Li Hao nodded again. You shouldn't be just a Chore's disciple, right? The red-dressed woman did not answer Li Hao's question, but asked again after looking at Li Hao. She saw that the cultivation of the young man in front of her was a top-grade earth immortal, and his cultivation was not weak, and the other party's age was definitely not very old. This talent is definitely not bad. How could he be a Chore's disciple? It should not be so. Li Hao did not answer directly, but still kept a faint smile on his face. "Fairy sister, you know where Tianxin Pavilion is, right? Can you tell me?" Li Hao said to the red-dressed woman again with a serious face. "I do know. But what are you going to Tianxin Pavilion for?" the red-dressed woman asked Li Hao again. "Guarding the door for someone," Li Hao said indifferently. "Guarding the door?" When the red-dressed woman heard what Li Hao said, a look of surprise appeared on her pretty face. "Yes." Li Hao nodded heavily, but did not explain anything more. Seeing this scene, the red-dressed woman did not ask any more questions. "But Tianxin Pavilion is our forbidden area. Even if I take you there, you can't get in," I heard the woman in red say in a deep voice again. "What? Forbidden area?" Li Hao was a little confused when he heard what the woman in red said. He really didn't know that the place that the old man in green showed him was actually the forbidden area of Tianxin sect, but when he turned around and thought about the other party's terrifying situation, he couldn't even explore it. The strength that comes out is taken for granted. Forbidden areas are forbidden areas. It doesn't matter. "Sister Fairy, just take me there. Please," Li Hao said seriously. When the woman in red saw Li Hao's appearance, she finally softened. "Let's go," the woman in red said calmly, but still agreed. Then, the blue bird under the woman in red flapped its wings and changed its direction. "Thank you." Li Hao said something to the woman in red, and then followed her directly. Li Hao followed the woman in red without saying a word. The two of them flew over several mountain peaks, and finally landed in front of a bamboo forest. And here, it seems to be the back mountain of Tianxin sect. Li Hao saw that the bamboo forest was shrouded in mist, making it difficult to see the scene inside. But faintly, it can be noticed that there seems to be a pavilion inside. Looking at the situation in front of him, Li Hao felt inexplicably nervous. This bamboo forest felt unusual. Inside is Tianxin Pavilion. At this time, the woman in red spoke slowly to her again. "But I'm afraid you won't be able to get in." "How will you know if you don't try?" Li Hao said calmly. "If you want to ask for trouble, don't blame me for not warning you," the woman in red said to Li Hao again, somewhat disapprovingly. She didn't think Li Hao could enter the Tianxin Pavilion. "You must know that this is the forbidden area of Tianxin sect, and even the direct disciples cannot enter. Of course, they cannot enter, because there are formations arranged by powerful people here." "Thank you, Senior Sister Fairy. By the way, I still don't know your name, Senior Sister Fairy." Li Hao thanked the woman in red again. "So what if you know?" Mu Hongluan said calmly. Li Hao also smiled casually when he heard this, and then turned his gaze to the bamboo forest in front of him. Afterwards, Li Hao walked directly towards the entrance of the bamboo forest ahead. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Just when Li Hao reached the edge of the bamboo forest, buzz! A strange force emerged from the ground. Even if the supreme power came to Li Hao, it would shock Li Hao out and prevent Li Hao from entering. Formation. As a formation master, Li Hao's understanding of formations is naturally extremely profound. At this moment, he directly felt the powerful formations in the bamboo forest. This formation is extremely terrifying. Even with my current level of cultivation, I am afraid that I cannot resist it. However, just when Li Hao thought he was about to be kicked out, the golden dragon and jade metal that Li Hao had put away before was emitting a strange wave at this moment. This fluctuation seemed to activate the surrounding formations. Immediately, Li Hao felt that there was a strange force wrapping himself around his body. The next moment, there was a strong force pulling him towards the bamboo forest. Immediately afterwards, Li Hao's figure disappeared directly from the spot. The woman in red behind her looked at the scene in a daze, with a look of disbelief suddenly appearing in her beautiful eyes. "How come?" Mu Hongluan's eyes widened, Her red lips parted, and there was a huge shock in her heart. Mu Hongluan is her name, and she is also a direct disciple of Jade Girl Peak. She is famous throughout the Tianxing sect, especially for her appearance. In. Just go in. The other party actually went in just like that. Didn't you say you can't get in? What's more, the other party is just a handyman disciple. What an unbelievable thing this is, unless you see it with your own eyes. Who would believe this? But if other people in the sect knew about it, it would probably cause huge waves again. Is the restriction gone? Mu Hongluan couldn't help but think this, and then she also walked forward, wanting to give it a try. However, just when she reached the edge of the bamboo forest, a terrifying force came to her. Even though Mu Hongluan activated her third-grade golden immortal cultivation, she still couldn't resist. Then she was blasted away hard. How so? Mu Hongluan murmured, but her agitated heart could not calm down. The restriction still exists, but the guy just entered. This guy must be unusual. At this moment, Mu Hongluan had a strong thought in her heart. By the way, I just forgot to ask this guy's name. Afterwards, Mu Hongluan stayed outside for a while, but still did not see Li Hao's shocked figure. Until 2 hours, 3 hours, and most of a day passed, the guy still didn't come out. This time, Mu Hongluan was confirmed that this guy had really gone in. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. God level tip, report the walking 500,000 at the beginning. Author, Tian Taido. Chapter 602. Just when Mu Hongluan was guarding outside and thought that Li Hao would be shaken out. At this moment, Li Hao had already entered the bamboo forest and walked towards it step by step. The surroundings were full of fog, making it difficult to see the specific scene around. Even the road under his feet could not be seen clearly. Even if Li Hao used his spiritual sense to explore the surroundings, he was blocked by an invisible force. That was the power of the ban. The bamboo forest was filled with a powerful ban, isolating it from the outside. If it weren't for this golden dragon jade card, I'm afraid I wouldn't even be able to get in. In this way, Li Hao walked towards it step by step. Finally, I don't know how long I walked, it seemed like just a moment, and it seemed like half a day. A ray of light appeared in front of Li Hao. The next moment, Li Hao saw it, and his eyes lit up. The mountains and rivers were beautiful, and the spiritual energy was extremely rich, even like it was about to turn into substance. I don't know how many times richer it was than outside. There is a stream flowing here, a small bridge connecting the opposite side, and there is a loft that goes straight into the sky. The moment he saw this loft, Li Hao's mind was shocked, because there were strange patterns carved on the loft, and some monster patterns, which were lifelike. These monster patterns seemed to be completely alive, revealing a strong pressure. Li Hao saw clearly that there was a plaque hanging on the loft, with the words Tianxing written on the plaque, with dragons and phoenixes flying, and the rhyme of the words revealed the breadth of the avenue, and no one knew who carved it. Tianxing Pavilion is the name of the loft in front of him. Here, it is like a paradise on earth of the Tianxing sect, and it is also an excellent place for cultivation. Is this the place I want to see? That is where the old man in green lives. Li Hao couldn't help but wonder in his heart. Obviously, this place is not for ordinary people to enter. What is the identity of the old man in green? What is in this loft? Li Hao was very curious about the things in the attic. Since he was already here and had to look around here, he naturally wanted to know what was in the attic. Li Hao thought to himself that since he had to watch the door, he must watch it carefully. Li Hao thought about it, and then he no longer hesitated and went directly to the attic in front. Li Hao kept walking forward. However, the Tianxing Pavilion seemed to be not getting closer to Li Hao. However, even so, Li Hao seemed to be in a state of madness at this moment, but he still walked forward step by step. I don't know how long I walked, but the attic in front still stood there quietly, motionless, and the distance between Li Hao and the attic was not shortened at all. However, Li Hao walked more and more eagerly, as if he would not stop until he reached his goal. Finally, at a certain moment, Li Hao's footsteps stopped. Li Hao seemed to wake up from a dream. Illusion. This is an illusion. Li Hao said in surprise. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, and a trace of fear surged in his heart. Unbeknownst to the gods and ghosts, he was actually caught in the illusion. You know, he is a master of formations, and his cultivation has also been promoted to the upper grade Earth Immortal, but he was trapped in this illusion without knowing it. Perhaps, the moment he just came in, he had already entered the illusion. The next moment, Li Hao stopped. Li Hao closed his eyes, and his consciousness spread out, sensing all the surrounding situations, every blade of grass and every little bit of movement, all were sensed by Li Hao. In the next moment, Li Hao suddenly opened his eyes, and the world in front of him seemed to have changed. Everything seemed to become illusory, but there were strange lines that could be clearly seen. Those lines constituted all things, and seemed to contain the mysterious power of the avenue, existing in a special trajectory. These lines are array patterns. Only cultivators like Li Hao who have a deep understanding of arrays can sense them. At this moment, a strange wave appeared on Li Hao's body. Illusion array, right? Break it for me. Li Hao looked at a certain position in front of him, his eyes bursting with a gleam of brilliance, and then Li Hao pointed to a position. A force of cultivation was directly blasted out with Li Hao's finger, and fell directly on a green grass next to it. Then, it seemed as if an invisible wave spread in all directions. The illusion array was broken. At this moment, Li Hao's position had come from the entrance of the bamboo forest to the wooden bridge on the stream, and was finally closer to the location of the attic. However, when Li Hao raised his foot again and wanted to step forward, Li Hao's brows wrinkled slightly again. For some reason, Li Hao inexplicably felt a sense of crisis in his heart. Intuition. This is the intuition of a cultivator. Something is wrong. Li Hao raised his foot and stopped in mid-air. The next moment, Li Hao turned around suddenly, climbed over the railing of the wooden bridge, jumped down from the side, and fell into the water in the stream. However, it seemed that Li Hao was about to fall into the stream. But at this moment, the stream turned into a bridge surface, and the surrounding scene also changed. It turned out that the place where Li Hao was just now was actually still on the bank of the stream, not on the wooden bridge. It was also an illusion. Li Hao just broke free from an illusion, but fell directly into another illusion. If Li Hao had stepped down just now, I'm afraid something terrible would happen. Fortunately, Li Hao's intuition just now was not at all wrong, so Li Hao avoided suffering a terrible thing. Huh. Li Hao exhaled heavily, and then he was a little relieved. Then, Li Hao stepped directly towards the wooden bridge in front of him. One step, he stepped on the wooden bridge. However, at this moment, as Li Hao took this step, it seemed to trigger some mechanism. The wooden bridge under Li Hao's feet collapsed, and then Li Hao was horrified to find that the stream under him seemed to have turned into a rolling river at this moment, and the waves were like swords, attacking directly towards the place where Li Hao was. The scene was extremely horrifying. Boom! This scene was beyond Li Hao's expectation and caught him off guard. Li Hao couldn't help but curse. I was very careful, but I was still tricked. It was another formation. It was not an illusion formation, but a powerful water-attributed attack and killing formation that came directly towards him. Boom! In Li Hao's body, the powerful power of cultivation was released instantly, and the powerful fairy power wrapped Li Hao's body in it. Li Hao even used the power of his physical body to the extreme. Bang! In the next moment, a dull sound broke out. The water was all over the sky, filling the space. Then, a figure rushed out. Li Hao's clothes were a little messy, and the whole person looked a little embarrassed, with a faint trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. This formation was broken by Li Hao. However, Li Hao also suffered a little minor injury. If Li Hao's physical strength was not strong enough, he would not be able to withstand the power of the formation just now. However, at this moment, Li Hao's face became a little ugly. Formation, it's another formation. He was very careful, but he still got tricked. This place is really a bit of a scam. God level tip, report the walking 500,000 at the beginning. Author, Tian Taido. Chapter 603. Even though Li Hao was very careful, he still got caught. Li Hao's formation skills were already very high, but he still didn't notice the formation just now, which was enough to show that the formation in this place was extraordinary. So, Li Hao became more cautious. Tianxin Pavilion still stood there quietly, some distance away from Li Hao. However, I don't know what kind of formation exists in this distance. Li Hao did not continue to move forward, but stopped and observed carefully. He also exerted all his spiritual power to understand all the surrounding scenes clearly. Li Hao could not sense any changes. Soon, Li Hao found that there was a stone in front of him, which seemed to have changed its position a little in a moment. Although it was only a little, it shocked Li Hao. The next moment, a gleam of brilliance flashed in Li Hao's eyes, and Li Hao directly shot out a spiritual power. Bang! This spiritual power directly smashed the stone. At this moment, in front of Li Hao, invisibly, a ripple barrier also dissipated. Another array was broken. Li Hao breathed a sigh of relief. This is another offensive array, fortunately, I found it again. Li Hao then took a step forward with confidence. But after taking the step, Li Hao stopped again. Because Li Hao surprisingly found another extremely obscure array in front of him. It was another offensive array, and as long as he touched it slightly, it would cause terrible consequences. Li Hao carefully explored the array pattern of this array, felt the mystery of this array, and constantly deduced the changes of this array. After a while, Li Hao broke this array again. However, at the moment when Li Hao broke this array, countless spiritual lights suddenly appeared around Li Hao, and then directly enveloped Li Hao. There is another formation, but it is different from the previous one. It is a trap formation. This formation cannot threaten Li Hao's safety, but it can trap Li Hao in it and he cannot get out. Li Hao was speechless. He was actually tricked again. This trap formation is clearly connected to the previous attack formation, but Li Hao was negligent and did not notice it, so he triggered this trap formation. Li Hao knew that he was tricked by the old man. There are formations and restrictions everywhere here. This is not a gatekeeper, but a disaster here. However, Li Hao did not give up on himself. Anyway, we have a lot of time. I don't believe it. Li Hao was tricked by this formation one after another, and his stubborn temper came up directly. Come on, I will break one by one. Li Hao said in a deep voice and set up a flog. Li Hao sat down cross-legged again, and then began to carefully sense the array pattern of this trapped array and deduce the changes of this trapped array. Each array has array patterns, which can be said to be the patterns of the Great Dao, existing in a strange pattern trajectory, thereby inducing the power of the Great Dao and evolving into an array. If you want to break the array, you must first understand this array, know the trajectory of its array pattern operation, and then find the key array pattern that can remove the array. Li Hao spent more than half an hour and finally broke this trapped array. But then, Li Hao encountered a lot of arrays, offensive and defensive arrays, psychedelic arrays, trapped arrays, chain arrays, etc., one after another, all kinds of them. It is not an exaggeration to call it a ban everywhere here, and the more he went forward, the more powerful the arrays Li Hao encountered. From the beginning, he could break the array by raising his hand, and later, it took longer and longer to break each array, and even took several days to break a formation. But as Li Hao broke more and more formations, Li Hao's formation skills were also improving at a great speed. In the following period of time, Li Hao kept breaking formations, and directly confronted the formations here. Li Hao was so immersed in breaking formations that he even forgot the time. Time flew, and several months passed. One day, in front of the gate of Tianxin Pavilion, a figure came, dressed in white, with an extraordinary aura. It was Li Hao. Finally, it's broken. Looking at the attic in front of him, Li Hao muttered. In front of him, there was no formation anymore, and all these formations were broken by Li Hao. And from the day Li Hao entered here, Li Hao has been here for more than half a year. In the past 6 months, Li Hao has been breaking formations, constantly deducing the changes of these formations, sitting cross-legged to rest when he was tired, and continuing after recovery. After so many repetitions, Li Hao even forgot how many formations he had broken. I'm afraid there were at least 800 if not 1,000. Various formations existed. At this moment, Li Hao's formation level had reached a new level. Not only that, Li Hao's cultivation had also broken through again, from the upper grade earthly immortal to the realm of the heavenly immortal, the lower grade earthly immortal. Moreover, Li Hao's soul power was much stronger than before. The harvest was not small. Li Hao looked at the attic in front of him. The attic had 7 floors. He didn't know what was inside. The old man asked me to guard the door, but he didn't say I couldn't go up. Li Hao thought so in his heart, and then walked into the Tianxin Pavilion. At the moment when Li Hao entered, Li Hao seemed to have entered another world. Another formation. Li Hao frowned, because Li Hao felt the existence of endless restrictions in the first floor of the Tianxin Pavilion. It seemed that the whole world was formed by restrictions, and he existed in a huge formation. If he went up, he had to break this formation? Li Hao's heart was condensed. The next moment, Li Hao explored the restrictions in this space. No, this is not an ordinary restriction. Li Hao found something wrong, and his eyes suddenly burst into a sharp look. This is clearly not an ordinary formation restriction, but a formation field. What is a domain? A domain can be said to be a small world, but this world is formed by endless arrays. There are 3,000 great ways, no matter which one you practice, you can actually achieve the Dao. No matter which Dao you practice, as long as the cultivator practices to a certain level, he can comprehend the true meaning of the Dao. If you practice sword, you can cultivate sword intent. If you practice knife, you can cultivate knife intent. If you practice spear, you can cultivate spear intent. And the true meaning of the Dao is the rules of the Dao, and the rules can be transformed into a domain.